Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss how the government announced another big climb down, a couple I suppose technically, on its nonsense post-Brexit immigration policies on Christmas Eve, as they've extended and potentially expanded the freedoms for foreign workers, including from the EU, to come and work in the UK as Brexit continues to get a headache from bumping into reality. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, it became obvious to everyone early this year that we were desperately short of a lot of key workers. Like, desperately short. The government seemed genuinely taken aback. Various affected industries asked the government to add a number of occupations to the shortage list. The government didn't want to do that. Apparently, the shortage occupation list doesn't actually have all our shortage occupations on. Silly me for thinking it should. So then industry leaders called for visas to be issued. Well, if you want to just control it, just issue some visas then, even if just for the short term. Now, when they said for the short term, what they meant was a couple of years in order for the government to work on encouraging more UK residents to take up these professions, get the necessary training, experience and so on. But the government wouldn't issue any visas at all. Adapt, they said. So they adapted by not producing and delivering enough food, reducing the number of beds available in the NHS and in some cases just collapsing completely. The NHS beds is what actually knocked me when I saw it last month. No surprise to me that the Conservatives have been shrinking the NHS in England since they came to power. But we have fewer general and acute beds available in England NHS right now than we did at the start of the pandemic. So in actual fact, it's not just over there just over a decade in power. During a deadly global pandemic, which has lasted nearly 2 years in this country, the government have actively reduced our hospital capacity. But anyway, that aside, we have a desperate shortage of workers, not helped by our Brexit immigration policy, which tells essential foreign workers to bugger off. It was a policy that was never going to work, ever. So despite the government expecting employers to just deal with the problem themselves, they eventually faced a choice between very obvious shortages, especially over Christmas. Like, it's almost like they think they do get away with it when there's shortages in our healthcare provision, because at any one time, most people don't need healthcare, like even in a pandemic. But people do need groceries. So shortages on the shelves, really, really bad, especially over Christmas. So it was a choice between shortages and ignoring their own daft policy. No brainer, really, even for them. Couldn't afford empty shelves everywhere at Christmas, so they issued some visas. The take-up was comical. Part of this was that they were issued too late. They were also only very short term. So when I said earlier how industry said, oh, in the short, like temporary ones for like a couple of years. No, for them, it meant, you know, you got kicked out on Christmas Eve. Oh yeah, you can come and work here for a few weeks while we need you, but then you're gone. You're going to be thrown out of the inn on Christmas Eve. Then they extended it a little bit, but only a little bit. It sort of depended. Like, for example, if you came here with the poultry industry visa to work, you know, like chicken factories and so on, you're still being kicked out of the country on New Year's Eve if you haven't left of your own accord before then. Not exactly welcoming. But also an indication that the government weren't actually interested in helping these industries, but in avoiding the most damaging headlines. So it's like they don't really care what happens to the poultry industry in general, but over Christmas, a bit dodgy. You know, we imported workers and produce for Christmas. You know, to hell with it during less politically sensitive times of year. And the way the timing worked was that the government issued these visas, but only for a very short period. They let the papers report on it, but criticism from the hard Brexit papers was blunted by the fact that they were very short-term in nature. Oh, they're going to last a few weeks. No point in making a fuss about that. Then, after the initial reporting, I said at the time they're going to have to extend it. This isn't going to last. And then they did. They extended it a little bit more quietly, a bit later, but it wasn't worth reporting on it prominently in the mainstream media. Well, now they've done it again. The government have announced an extension and expansion of visas for care and agriculture workers. And they announced it on Christmas Eve. So that there's no chance of any significant reporting because there's hardly any news on Christmas Day. Then they sent a fella to harass the Queen with a crossbow to make sure. I don't actually think they sent them. But that someone did it anyway was no doubt a bit of a bonus for the government. Oh, something else to occupy the headlines. So agriculture first. When the government were ignoring pleas from other sectors, they did issue seasonal worker visas, because those are the only visas they really did issue that were needed, and to help farms out this year. It wasn't considered enough, though. They didn't issue enough. And as a result of the government not indicating that they even understood the problems, they weren't even committing to extending it. Many farms just had to plant fewer crops for next year because they weren't able to harvest their crops this year. Massive loss of money. That's not sustainable. So they just said, look, we're just going to have to cut back and charge more for our crops. So that means that even if the government do take the problem seriously, we've limited ourselves next year. So we're going to have less British produce. It's going to cost more, and we're going to be more reliant upon imports. We're definitely going to have to import a load more crops again, come what may. More than is traditionally the case. We always have to import a certain amount, about half anyway. And given transport difficulties, that is likely to mean continuing to see fruit and veg on supermarket shelves that is past its best, in all honesty, because it takes so long to get there. But the government have now said that fruit and veg growers can recruit from overseas for harvest for the next 3 years. And there's even a suggestion that they will increase the number of visas available as well. Can't be certain that this was always planned. The Conservatives have a lot of safe seats in agricultural areas, but they didn't seem to mind destroying those local economies with Brexit in general and their trade deals in particular. Maybe they thought they could still count on their votes as the least of all evils. I know we're putting them out of business, but it's not like they're going to vote Labour, is it? Or the Lib Dems, can you believe it? And then, in recent by-elections, the electorate did just that. The Conservatives have lost 2 safe seats, and they may have thought now, we don't really want to lose a load of these safe seats. But essentially, I see this as the government understanding perfectly well how damaging their Brexit is, but making sure that they get to have their cake and eat it. They tell people we have these tough immigration rules now. We couldn't have had that in the EU. Tough immigration rules, really tightly controlled. We don't. It's now much easier for foreign workers to come to the UK and take well-paid, desirable jobs, assuming that they can put up with our attitude. It's only tough for people willing to take up lower paid employment. But for key workers, it's us who pays. Because those people can easily find work elsewhere in Europe. I've said it before, Brexit means that British workers are now more likely to be forced into low paid work because those are the jobs in abundance which we are struggling to fill. Vote leave for the crap jobs was not on the side of the bus either. So now that the government have convinced Brexit supporters that we have these tough new rules, they've just relaxed them, as they were always going to, while they weren't looking. The government have said that the number of visas available for this farm work will be reduced in 2023. We shall see. Again, I could just read that as them saying to calm people down, but it's not going to be long term, it's just short term, and although it's going to last 3 years, we're going to wind it down. Yeah. They must know that UK residents aren't going to relocate for summer to do harvest work in sufficient numbers. Maybe they just expect the number of farms to be reduced through their attempts to force them out of business with the end of EU farming subsidies or fears of damaging trade deals. And they've done it for care as well. Obviously, it's very damaging to have a shortage of fresh food, hence the help for some farmers continuing. But it's also bad to not have enough care places due to a shortage of staff. I mean, the people who use care facilities, by and large, are the elderly demographic that disproportionately vote Conservative. The Department for Health has finally agreed to put care staff onto the shortage occupation list. Now, this sounds better than a limited number of visas, though it does suffer from the same problems as their other efforts. It's temporary. They're making it clear this is just temporary. So the implication being at any time they could decide that it's no longer a shortage and that those people, thanks for coming over, now bugger off, and quite quickly, if you wouldn't mind. Though I doubt that would happen anytime soon because there isn't going to be a sudden influx of UK residents taking this work up. The government are saying that the measure will be reviewed as the pandemic pressures ease up. Like, if the pandemic pressures ease up, are we going to need less spaces in care homes? Fewer care workers? I don't understand that. So anyway, in about 10 more years then, if the Conservatives remain in charge and the pandemic subsides, maybe they'll review it. But it also needs to be remembered that although these moves once again highlight that Brexit cannot survive contact with reality, it won't be enough. The government they're like a lazy student. One of those students I've sometimes had that keep trying to do the bare minimum of work needed to get through the course. You try and tell them what they need to do. No, he's just telling me what I need to do to get the best grade. I don't want the best grade. I'll just do this bare minimum. But what they consider the bare minimum may be lower even than that. The government are behaving reactively, which means they act too late. Instead of acting before the bad thing happens, when they're warned about it, they wait until it might not happen. Right? And then implementing small measures, because, we don't want to go mad, no, we just want to do just enough. And then increasing them when they're proven to be not enough. Basically, they have the same attitude to Brexit as they do COVID. And it doesn't work for that either. If we are to be the sort of society you expect of one of the world's wealthiest countries, you need strong links with the rest of the world. Oh dear. You need a lot of migrant labour to power such an economy. So Brexit will continue to buckle when it hits reality. The question is not about how many of the promises of Brexit will be true, but how many of the lies will people continue to believe and for how long? Because the only credible Brexit strategy that the Conservative Party can possibly have is to actively shrink our economy down to the point where what they said Brexit will bring is actually brought to us. But that means being a much less productive country. And you can see the government trying to frame these moves as temporary as a way of suggesting that the Brexit immigration promised land is there. We just need more time to get to it. And every time they extend the scheme, it will be another temporary measure. We just need a bit more time, a little bit more time. It's what they said on the economy and Cameron and Osborne since they came into office. Oh, the green shoots are there. The green shoots of recovery, they said. Every year they said it. Just a little bit more time. It's just around the corner. Don't let Labour come in and wreck it all. It never ends because their plans are not in the country's interest and never were. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.